Yeah, Food and
Food
Drug
and Drug
Administration.
Administration. Okay, I
Right.
sound like an idiot. But Food and Drug Administration. But you seem to be overall quite critical of, I guess, the system in which things, food and drug products are tested and
Right.
approved. What is that system like? Because, you have firsthand experience and knowledge
Sure.
into this
Sure.
system. What is the testing system? How are these clinical trials being done, and how are things ultimately getting through and into market?
Sure. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you, Justin, are the CEO of a drug company. Okay, let's just say you're the CEO of a drug company. Your job is to two things. One, make products that are safe and effective. But two, money for your shareholders. You got to do both. If you do the first one, they'll say, nice job, give you a nice plaque and say goodbye. So you have to do both. So you have molecules that scientists tell you are promising. One molecule is promising for perhaps central nervous system effects and treating mental illness. Another molecule is promising for heart failure. So you spend money to develop the chemistry for these molecules, okay? And most times the chemistry fails. The molecule can't live I don't mean live. It can't keep the right configuration for in the pH that is in the central nervous system, for example. So there went $90,000 down the chute, okay? And you have a few other molecules you work up, and now those molecules seem to be able to function in vitro, and so now you begin animal studies. And in the animal studies fail. So the animal studies cost you maybe $175,000. Okay, if you get that far, then you're able to start some phase 1 human studies. These are studies in primarily normal volunteers who take this drug and are monitored very carefully for any effects, okay? And so the drug that we thought might have been effective for heart failure causes seizures. Well, nobody anticipated that, And so that fails. And now you're talking about up to $500,000 of investment down the tube. And you then go to phase 2 studies. Phase 2 studies cost hundreds of millions of dollars. These are studies, small studies in patients, not normal volunteers, but patients who actually have the disease. And you find that most phase 2 studies fail. So now you're in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars down the tube. Then you come to the phase 3 study for one, and one drug gets to phase 3. It's a large study which replicates the phase 2 result. So again, looking at sick people, we now know the dose of the drug to give, and we assess them for benefit. And the phase 3 study looks promising. Unfortunately, there's a relatively rare adverse event that occurs. And now the question is, what is the role now of the company? Now, shareholders, first of all, I am not a fan of shareholders. Shareholders to me are interested in money. Okay, so I get capitalism, right? But I am not a fan of shareholders. Shareholders don't care about adverse events. They want return on investment, and they will say to you, Justin, are you really telling me that you invested $1.1 billion in this product and you're going to sink it because of this rare adverse event? You're under a lot of pressure there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And likely you make the wrong decision, you'll wind up losing your job and you won't be CEO anywhere else. So what do? Most drug companies, most drug companies are interested in getting the drug approved. And so they try to pitch the corners. And they say, well, maybe we could do a post-marketing study just to see, after you approve the drug, just to see how serious this adverse event really is. Or maybe what we do is treat people with a relatively harmless intervention that will help reduce the likelihood of this serious adverse event. Maybe we can give them shots and it would help decrease the likelihood of this. But the temptation is to downplay the serious adverse event because you want your return on investment. And you want the return on investment, Justin, not just on the 1.1 bill you put into this, but on all the other drug failures. Nobody paid you for that. When the animal studies failed, the government didn't say, well, Justin, I'm really sorry about that. Let us reimburse you for that. You absorbed that. And so, as a CEO, you are in really in quite a crucible here to decide what's in the best interest of the company, what's in the best interest of public health, and what's in your best interest. My thesis is that the only way you can fairly answer that, and Justin, I would say, if you're just thrust in this position, how terrible is that? Because you haven't thought about this before. These are titanic concepts for you, and you hadn't thought about it. My thesis is, as you develop as a scientist, you are always asking yourself, where is my ethical position? Have I crossed my ethical line? And what am I willing to give up for my principles? For somebody to take you out of it, for a CEO who decided that money is everything, the decision is easy, right? Let's just approve this baby. For somebody who's decided, I really am concerned about public health implications, then I'm willing to give up my CEO position. They've already agonized through this, developed the wisdom, and are willing to say, you can have this, like JFK told Congress during the Cuban Missile Crisis, you can have this lousy job.
Yeah. I would have to assume that most people probably fall somewhere in the middle, right? They're not completely driven by money 100%,
right?
But they're also not just driven by their moral and their principles and their moral compass 100%. They probably skew somewhere in the middle, as I would. Yeah. And when you're put into that position, I can only imagine that, God, it's after hearing what you said, it must be so hard and so rare to have a promising drug that actually makes it through all those phases.
Yep.
And when you finally, and after all those failures that don't even make it that far, after all those failures, when you finally get one that passes through and it shows a lot of promise, and then you have a hiccup of, something, an adverse effect at the last stage.
Yep.
I mean, God, you got to just be pulling your hair out, and your whole world kind of distorts in terms of what you should do and what is the right choice. And you have pressure coming so many ways. Internally, you're probably just being torn apart. I feel bad. I feel bad for people in that position.
So, but okay, Justin, I absolutely agree with you. That was how the Carveda law people looked at me. They had just gotten their way of, it's the football player who breaks all of these tackles and gets to the 5-yard line, and Moyé has him by the ankle.
Red zone defense. So you got good red zone defense over there.
Who the heck is this guy? Where did he come from? Why should we allow him to ruin, to essentially destroy this drug's development? That was their point of view. And that's why these FDA meetings can be so cataclysmic, because you have the public health perspective from the one hand, rigorous methodology on the one hand, and you have market forces on the other. and most times they're kind of just glancing blows, but every now and then there's going to be a rumble.